Okay, hello everyone, Seton Hall students. I hope you guys are doing well at home. I know you guys are a stressful time, so I hope you guys are doing okay online with your courses. Everything's going smoothly with all your assignments. So I have to do my wife a favor. She wants me to present and tell you a little bit about myself as a deaf person. So, of course, I'm willing to for my wife. So, I'll talk a little bit about my life, how I grew up. I was born deaf. But my parents had no idea I was deaf until I was about 1 and a half. They brought me to an audiologist and found out that I was deaf. I am profoundly deaf in both ears. My sister, my older sister, is hard of hearing. So she can hear better than I can. So my parents were shocked. They had another deaf child in the family. So they weren't sure what to do with me. So they decided to send me to an oral school in Summit, New Jersey. In Summit, it's a small school. I would say maybe they have 10 to 15 kids in the school. It's very small, oral school. They taught lip reading. Sign language is not allowed at all. At that time, I didn't know any sign language. So I stayed at that school for 2 years, learning how to speak and lip read. But it wasn't a good fit for me. It didn't work out for me. The practicing was frustrating. It wasn't easy, and I gave up on it. So my parents were looking for a different communication method, and they thought sign language would work for me. So they bought this book, or 2 or 3 different books, I should say, to learn sign language. So I joined them, and I loved learning sign language from these books. I was about 5 when I started to learn sign language. And I felt happier. I felt able to communicate with my parents. I was able to get along with sign language. So my parents decided to put me into a mainstream school in my town, elementary school. I was the only deaf person in my class. I had an interpreter who went along with me, who signed everything, and I would watch the interpreter. But elementary school was challenging for me as a deaf person. I would miss a lot of stuff. I'd miss a lot of important information. And I was falling behind compared to my hearing peers. So I did struggle. And also I would have a one-to-one teacher, like a resource teacher with me for like an hour to help catch me up on all the things I had missed academically. It did help a lot, but still, you know, when I was the only deaf person in a mainstream class, it was challenging. So my parents were not sure. You know, middle school was the same experience, but it was worse because I felt like I lost my friends in middle school because, you know, puberty hits and teenagers and attitudes and bullying and you know, I think, you know, I got bullied too, but, you know, I felt fed up in middle school. So for high school, when it came time to go to high school, I went to Governor Livingston. It's in Berkeley Heights, and at that school, it's a hearing school, but they had a small deaf program there. I would say at the time they had about 30 deaf kids there. So they had 3 or 4 teachers that could sign, that knew sign language, that could sign. So I had a self-contained class with, you know, 5, 6, 7 other deaf kids in the class, and we would sign. And I picked up so much more. You know, I made dramatic improvement with my English, with my reading, with everything went up dramatically. I started to be able to pick up more information. It really benefited me a lot. So I stayed there for 4 years, of course. Some of my classes I had self-contained. I caught up in all my academics. And then senior year, I was fully mainstreamed with an interpreter. Because I had made such an improvement, I was on par with my peers. So it had a huge impact in my life going to school there. It really made a big change for me. Also, I played baseball there. I played basketball there too. 3 years varsity baseball and 3 years varsity basketball. I worked out well with my hearing peers. I had always known how to play sports growing up with hearing kids, so that was never an issue for me. In college, I had a lot of offers from colleges who wanted me to play baseball and some who wanted to play baseball and basketball. But I decided to go to RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology, because they have a huge deaf program there. I would say about 1,200 deaf students from all over the world are there. Also, part of that college is called the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. And that is especially for deaf students. They have different programs there you can learn. So when you're at NTID, you feel like you're ready, you can just transfer to RIT for your bachelor's. Or Bachelor's of Arts or Bachelor's of Science. So I stayed there for 5 years. I finished my mechanical engineering degree and graduated in 2001. After that, I came back home to New Jersey, played around for a couple years. In 2004, I decided to take a job offer as a drafter. I worked at a small engineering firm in Chester, New Jersey. So that was a good experience for me. I was the only deaf person in the company. So, and at first I was awkward. How am I going to communicate with everyone? But I found a way. Instant messaging, email. I taught a small sign language class to my coworkers, which was nice. I'd write things down on paper. I communicated well with everyone at the firm. I worked there for 6 years. But in 2010, I got laid off. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to the engineering world. I kind of felt limited in that career as a deaf person. I felt like I kind of hit a ceiling, Working at a desk was also not really for me. So I decided to go back to school to become a teacher of the deaf. So I went back to school 2012. I was also Mr. Mom, taking care of the kids. My wife would go to work during the daytime, and I was in school. And it was challenging. It was challenging. At night, I'd go to grad school. Daytime, I'd, handle the kids and work. And nighttime, I'd go to class every day, every night. And it was challenging. But when I graduated in 2014 with my master's degree in deaf education, that was probably one of the proudest moments of my life, really. I had never thought, that I would end up doing that and get my master's degree in teaching. It really wasn't part of my plan. So I got my first teaching job at the Bruce Street School for the Deaf. It's a hearing school that has a small program for the deaf. I would say around 50 to 60 deaf kids from kindergarten to 8th grade. I worked as an ASL teacher. I was willing to teach sign language to all the hearing students from kindergarten to 8th grade. I worked there for a couple years teaching and going around to the different classrooms, and I really did enjoy it, but it was challenging. Sometimes, teaching with 28 kids in a class, dealing with all those people, it was a lot. It was a lot of work, a lot of, classroom management and stuff like that. So after 2 years, I found another teaching job at the New York School for the Deaf as a PE teacher. So they hired me as a PE teacher, and I was like, all right, okay. I have an athletic background. I'm very experienced with sports and things like that and working out and stuff. So they hired me in that position. So since then, I have been doing that, and I love it. I'm also the head coach for the basketball team. I just finished my second year. So it's been a really good experience for me. Having a deaf team and versing other deaf teams. I'm really happy where I am. It's a great opportunity for me to get along with the deaf kids and teach them, as they grow up and, hopefully they will feel ready to, confront the world and go to college. get a job. I try to show, that they can do anything, meaning, like me growing up, I want to have, the same impact on my students, and realize that they could do anything they want. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Okay, I have questions. Okay, I got a list of questions. Hold on. Guys! Sorry, I'm yelling at the kids. Just stop. They're fighting with the dog. She's yelling at the kids. Okay, hang on. The questions. Okay. Do some social situations make you feel nervous or anxious because of your deafness? So they said, do social situations make me feel nervous? No. No, I'm very open-minded. I'm a very social person. So you don't feel anxious about situations because you're deaf? No, I never felt anxious growing up. How did you communicate with your family? So my family, like I said, my parents did learn sign language when I was 5 to communicate with me. And they still communicate, they still sign. Not like fluent, no, but they sign, they get along, they use their voice sometimes. I grew up, using total communication, so like talking and signing at the same time. That's how I communicated growing up. So that's always how I communicated with your family. So she said, in the 90s, 91, 92, 93, when I was in high school, we didn't have cell phones. The only way we could get in contact with parents would be a payphone. So I would pick up the payphone, and I'd be like in 8th grade, and practice would be done, and I would pick up the payphone, put in my quarter, dial the number, and I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down to 1, and I'd say, "Hey, hello, please pick me up," and then I would hang it down, and I would hope that somebody had answered and then show up. But that's really sad. That's what I had to do. Okay. Okay, next question. Okay. What kinds of sounds can you pick up on? I don't have a hearing aid, but if I do have a hearing aid on, I can hear kids screaming loud. I feel so bad for my poor wife every day listening to that. My dog barking, I could hear that if I had a hearing aid. Like loud noises I can hear. But quiet sounds, low sounds, I can't hear. What about without your hearing aid? What can you hear? So she said without my hearing aid. Without my hearing aid, I am in silent mode. Nothing. Maybe a really, really, really loud scream if it was close. Something like that. Something really, really loud, very close. Okay. What about vibrations? Do I feel vibrations? Yeah. If I go to a concert, like if I go to a concert with my wife, she loves to go to concerts, so sometimes I'll go with her. I can feel it. I can feel the music. I feel the vibrations. I feel, the beat. You can feel it, like the crowd feels it, and you can follow the vibrations, So I do like to feel the vibrations. Okay, hold on, next question. Okay. When you think in your mind, like for example, when you're reading, how do you think in your mind? Like people hear a voice in their mind. Do you see? So like when you read a book, do you visualize it? Yeah. I visualize it. I mean, I guess you'd say it's like speaking your mind, but I don't visualize little hand signing. I read like you guys do. I visualize it the way a hearing person would. Okay. What was school like for you? Which type of school did you go to? Yeah. So what type of school? When I was little, I went to an oral school for deaf and hard of hearing kids to be trained on lip reading. Elementary school, middle school, mainstream school in my town with an interpreter. High school, I went to a deaf program that was a small program. And college, I went to RIT. Graduate school, I went to Hunter College. I think I'm done with school now. For life. Maybe I'm done with school for life. So how was school? How was your experience in school for you? My school experience, it was, as a deaf person, I don't think I had a deaf identity. I don't think I had a deaf identity till I was in high school. Then I got to be around other deaf people. And at first, I think I picked on them. Because I had never been around deaf people before. I thought, oh, you guys are nothing. And everyone, kind of hated me, And they were kind of like, who is this guy? And I realized, wow, I am like you. I am a deaf person. And I started to identify myself actually as a deaf person. And I realized, wow, I'm deaf. You guys are deaf. We're alike. And my identity in high school and college because of communication, because of being around people who were like me, who grew up deaf, being exposed to deaf culture for the first time. I think I had a better understanding of who I was as a person. Okay, let's see the next question. What are your major challenges that you face from being deaf? Big challenges for me as a deaf person. Growing up in the hearing world, I understood the hearing world and how it worked. I think my biggest challenge was always communication. I would interview with many companies, and everything would go well. It would go great. I'd be qualified for a position, but then I wouldn't get hired. And they'd say, oh, we found someone better qualified. But at the same time, I was never sure, if they just weren't sure how a deaf company would fit in their company, a deaf person would. I think it's just lack of education on their part. You see that everywhere. You see limitations that are placed on deaf people. Limitations, I'm happy I work at a deaf school because communication is so available there. I feel comfortable there. I can communicate with everyone at the school. It's not like I can't do this. I can't talk to this person. At a deaf school, you think I can do this. I can do that. I can do this. When I worked in my engineering firm, it was limited. I can do this or this, but there were things I couldn't do or wasn't allowed to do at that company. Okay. Okay. What are your experiences going drive-through at a restaurant? So she asked me my experience at drive-through in a restaurant. Yeah, of course I've done drive-through. I have a right to order. If I'm really hungry, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I gotta go to a drive-through. So I usually just drive through. I go to the front. I do, hey, I'm deaf. I write it down on the paper. Sometimes they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, nope, can't hear. Here's my order. And, I hand it to them. And then it takes a little bit for the order process. And if there's a couple cars behind me, oh, well, I got a right to get my food, too. What about when you order at a restaurant? So she said, what if I go to a restaurant? If I have a menu, the waitress or waiter will just say what you want, and I'll just point to it and show them, I want this or I want that. And I'll usually just point to it. Okay. Sorry. What kind of music do you enjoy? Music. I guess I like alternative, rock, some hip-hop music. It's important that I feel the beat. That's all I feel. So that's all that's important to me. What about your experience as a deaf father with hearing kids? So she asked me my experience as a deaf father with 2 hearing boys. It's been very positive, but challenging at times. You know, I'm the only deaf person in this family. So my wife, you know, really does, you know, expose the children to sign language. We both do, you know, as much as we can. But if I'm out at work and, you know, my wife is home, she'll talk to them. You know, they're hearing and they'll talk. And when I come home, you know, the kids have to use sign language. And sometimes the kids don't want to follow it. You know, sometimes, you know, I'll miss things that they say. So I try to say, you know, listen, you have to use sign language. You know, when I'm here, you have to respect me as a deaf person. And they're learning. You know, it takes time. They're little. You know, compared to a few years ago, things I think are getting better and easier. When my sons were really young and they were starting to sign, I could always understand them and communicate well with them. But when they were younger, even really little, it was harder. Now I think they're more open-minded and my communication with them is better. Their willingness to learn sign language is also better. Sometimes you just have to give kids time. Okay. Oh, hold on. I messed up the questions. Sorry. No. Okay. What's your relationship like with your family? With my family? My relationship with my family. I grew up, you know, very well. They supported me a lot. I always played baseball, basketball. They'd always come to my games and support me. When I was in college, you know, they understood that I had limited communication access, but they always tried to make an effort to sign because, you know, they were always proud of me and wanted me to succeed. So I really do appreciate their effort, you know, to help me be successful. I always felt very supported by my family. What about my communication with my sisters? I have 2 sisters. One is older. She is 6 years older than me. And we have a good relationship, but we're not very close. You know, she does her own thing and I do my own thing. My second sister, we're 2 years apart, and she's hard of hearing. So she did grow up as part of the hearing world. She does speak very well, but she also signs very well, and we've always communicated more. You know, we communicate better, and I think we have a different kind of view of life. So I think I'm closer to my second sister because we have so much in common. So does your older sister sign? So she asked me if my older sister signs. No. She knows just the basics and the ABCs. That's it. Just a tiny little bit. Okay. Is there anything you wish hearing kids knew about deafness? Is there anything I wish hearing people knew? How to communicate with deaf people in different ways. Sometimes hearing people just kind of stare at you or walk away or stuff like that. So sometimes I think they don't understand, you know, deaf culture or, you know, same as anybody who's confronted with another culture. There's like a breakdown in education. You know, they don't know what to do. So I think it's just all about respect. I think it's about respect. I think it'll make somebody learn something, give somebody an opportunity. Every culture has their own uniqueness, their own, you know, difference, their own values, you know, and you can learn something from every different culture and every different person's. You know, it helps you understand how the world works. Also, what about deaf driving? Deaf driving. Okay. So, same process as you guys went. 16, I got my permit, passed my test, passed my driving test, got a license. 17. Got a new car, been driving it. Same as you guys. If I get pulled over, if I'm in traffic and somebody's behind me honking the horn, obviously I just ignore it. Doesn't bother me. I just focus on doing my own job, just driving. I don't know. I've been driving 25 years and I just drive. I got a good driving record, no tickets on my record. I guess I'm a safe driver. Actually, research shows that deaf people are safer driver than hearing people because they're more focused on the road. Hearing people are very distracted with everything that they hear, and they're trying to do stuff at the same time, and deaf people are very focused on the road. What about getting pulled over? So if I get pulled over, I just say, hey, I'm deaf, and they go, oh. I tell them, I'd like an interpreter, and you have a right to have an interpreter so you understand what's going on if you get pulled over. And sometimes I'd say, can I have an interpreter? And the cop would be like, just go. Let me go. Most of the time, somebody would just let me go. There's one cop in Chester, I remember getting a ticket, and I was like, why did I even get a ticket? Sometimes it can happen. It can happen. But most of the time, I think things are fine. No, I think that's it. All right, she said we're done. So I hope you enjoy my little story and my little chat with you guys. I hope you guys are doing okay. You want to say hi?
Hi.
All right. Sign your name. N. What's your sign name? Brandon. How old are you?
7.
Say it in sign language. You gotta teach him.
7.
7. Seriously?
7.
You see? You get an F. You're done. Okay.
Marley.
No, don't bring the dog in.